Hey everyone, I am here with my important public service announcement today. I am going to give it a few seconds for a few folks to join in, and then we'll get right to it because I've been talking about this a lot in my presentations, and I felt like I just need to say it very clearly and um, to a broader audience. So, great. So, one of the things before I start, I wanted to make two really important announcements. One is that on get the right date. On April 10th at 8 p.m., I'm going to be hosting a live webinar called Female Fury, Understanding Its Complex, its context, and its complexity in order to advance maternal health, breastfeeding, and a new feminist agenda. So I'm excited about talking about this issue because I think we don't talk enough about the frustration and anger that women feel in motherhood and also in breastfeeding, and how we can better understand that to actually move it forward. And obviously last week's announcement around the new postpartum drug is an important time to start talking about how we can perhaps help culturally to lift up some of this disappointment, anger, anxiety that women find themselves in immediately after becoming a mother. So I'm excited about that. So that's April 10th at 8 p.m. The registration is going to go live tonight for you all to sign up for that. And I hope that you will join me in that powerful conversation. So I wanted to talk to people who care about mothers and babies and people who are interested and focused on breastfeeding today, because there's a fatal flaw that I have to admit that we are making that is really something that I feel is detrimental to the field and to our outcomes. And so I'm here asking that we take on something, a different approach, and that is to give up time. We have to give up time. And when I say give up time, I mean we have spent a lot of our work, many times celebrating mothers who may, breastfeed for 6 months or 12 months or 2 years. And that is important because we know how much effort is involved to make those goals. But what about the mothers who haven't met those measures, who haven't met those milestones? What do we do about them? Right? And so we have created an environment where if you haven't put in a significant amount of time, then we often kind of deem you not worthy of celebration. And this is very dangerous because if we actually acknowledge the social barriers, the cultural barriers, the racial barriers, then we can acknowledge that many women are not able to meet these milestones through no fault of their own. Through no fault of their own. And so we really have to think of a new way to think about these milestones and not think about being dependent on time. So I'm asking us to consider giving up time because here's what's happening. Many women may want to breastfeed and they cannot due to many factors. We all know what they are. We live in the only industrialized nation with no paid maternity leave. We know that the breast has been hypersexualized. We know that our physicians aren't even trained on lactation management properly in medical school. Like the list goes on and on, right? But so when a mother is unable to breastfeed through no fault of her own because she's faced too many barriers, we have to welcome her in. Because if not, we're saying, sorry, you can't be a part of our club because you haven't breastfed for 6 months or 12 months or what we consider meaningful duration. And when that happens, these women who we really want to include are finding a voice someplace else. They are finding and feeling solace and comforted someplace else. And that someplace else is very dangerous, very dangerous. And so we have to create space for all the stories of breastfeeding. If you know a mother who has breastfed for 1 week, you celebrate her. You celebrate her for 2 weeks, for 3 days. We cannot continue to build an inclusive movement if we're stuck on time. We have to give up time. Included with that is this idea of definition. We have often defined breastfeeding as, at the breast, not through a pump. And if you've been exclusively pumping, then you're breast milk feeding. It's too much crazy talk in the language. We have to create a space for the full spectrum of breastfeeding experiences, which includes everything from, yes, exclusive breastfeeding to partial feeding, pumping, doing both, whatever. That's the vision that we need to create, and that's how we can get more mothers to come into our message. Now, this is critically important because so many times mothers feel that they failed when they can't meet their breastfeeding goals. And we know that is not true. We know that the system has failed them. The system is often failing us, even in our own work, right? But if we don't allow these women to be welcomed into our club, if we don't find space for all of these stories, even the mothers who did not get to breastfeed, then we are failing them too. We are failing them too. And I know that we don't want to do that. I know that I don't want to do that. So we have to make space for these stories. And when we tell the stories of the mother who breastfed for 2 weeks, let's explain why. Let's tell that story differently as a way to illuminate the barriers and the things that people don't get to do. Let's tell that story differently. But we cannot continue to only celebrate time put in when we know that the barriers are so severe, when we know that women are struggling, when we know that women are often finding themselves angry, frustrated, disappointed in these very early days of motherhood. We have to do that. You know, I think about this a lot because in my book, toward the end, I talk about this concept of spaghetti sauce, right? So, you know, it's like an American phenomenon that we have a whole aisle of spaghetti sauce and all types of crazy flavors, things we probably haven't even tried yet. But that's because food scientists spent a lot of time figuring out that we actually like variety. And my vision for what I would love for all women to experience is that they can see when they think about the breastfeeding community and when they think about what the breastfeeding community supports, it's a whole spectrum of experiences. It's a whole spectrum of experiences that is not just about we are celebrating 6 months and 12 months, but and 3 years, although that is worthy of celebration. But we are also celebrating 1 week, 3 days, and all of that is included. And so when people look for themselves within our space, within our movement, within our advocacy, that they can see themselves as part of the whole aisle of different sauces of breastfeeding, right? If you want chunky, garden chunky, we got that. If you want 4 cheese, we got that, right? All of these breastfeeding experiences, from exclusive all the way through to exclusive pumping, and everything is in between, is something that we welcome and we celebrate. This is the thing that we have to get right, because when women don't feel welcome, they go to someplace else to feel welcome, and that place is very dangerous. We can do better at making sure that in our work, on our website, in the things that we're posting, that we are celebrating mothers throughout the spectrum of breastfeeding. Show it all. Show it from the beginning to the end. And also talk about the barriers that woman faced, either the ones that she faced and could not overcome, the ones that she did overcome. And this way we can really show that we are an inclusive place. Because you know what? Many of these mothers will have another child, right? And they may be inclined to try again if they felt welcomed by our community. And they may have a, sister, cousin, friend who also has a child, and she will remember that experience of being welcomed and that her experience was actually included in our story that we're creating. So we have to do that so that we don't lose them permanently and that we can continue to provide support to all mothers. So I'm asking you all to join me as we try to lift up the stories, not of just all the exclusive breastfeeding, which we know is happening, but also the other stories of those in between, those who did not meet their goals, who are also worthy of our celebration and our acknowledgement, and that in that, we're creating a more inclusive movement, and that people aren't feeling that they were left out and that we did not find a space for them. So that's what I wanted to share today. We can definitely do better. Yep. I see some comments here about people feeling guilty, but they have to supplement. There's no need to feel guilty. Supplementation, if needed, is an important part of the breastfeeding experience. The most important thing is to make sure that we are using supplementation as a bridge to get back to breastfeeding, and that you're getting support so that it doesn't end breastfeeding. That's really what we want. But all of these stories are important, and they're all part of the breastfeeding narrative. So we have to tell them. Let's keep telling them. So I hope that we can continue to do that. I've been talking in my presentations on some specific ways to make sure that we are acknowledging all the stories, and for some ways for us to work together. Breastfeeding Awareness Month is coming up in August, people. So this is a great time for us to start thinking about what we're going to be doing, but also making sure that we're going to be spending our time showing this broad experience that we can lead by showing this broad experience of what breastfeeding really is, right? And then they will not say those things about us that they say, right? And then we will be an inclusive community for all mothers. And then we will really be telling the truth. We will be telling the truth about what breastfeeding really looks like in this country. And that can only help us. That can only help us. It's been important for me to say this because it's important for me to say this so that we can work on this. We have people who are working on what's going on for August, people who are working on what they're doing in their offices, what they want to do, what they're posting on social media. Please remember that we want to tell our stories. We're going to give up time. Time is a major milestone, but it is not the only one, especially when we know the cultural and social and racial barriers that are out there. We have to tell the stories differently. And when you are telling those 12-month and those 2-year stories, make sure that you are telling them to say, well, what supported this person to do that? Tell the story differently. Yes, she got to 2 years, but let's find out the why. You know, it didn't happen because of pixie dust, I'm pretty sure. How was she supported? Where was the privilege that she had? Who was there to help her? What kind of people were able to support her? What did her employer have to do to make that possible? All of these things are part of the story that we're not telling. And I have to tell you, friends, us not telling all those stories is causing great harm to mothers and who really want to feel like they belong. They really want to feel like they belong. And we know that we feel that way, but we haven't been communicating that effectively externally and to others. So let's start doing that in a more conscientious way. Okay, I wanted to share that because it's really been on my mind so much, and in talking to people in my recent travels. I am headed in the morning first to Connecticut to the La Leche League in the Hartford area. So I forgot to mention that, and then off to California to the San Joaquin Breastfeeding Coalition, and then to an amazing community event. I hope that you are sharing. If you know anyone in Northern California, we'll be having a community event in Stockton, which I'm super proud about. Don't forget, on April 10th at 8 p.m., I will be hosting a live webinar on female fury, which is connected to what we're talking about today. How can we use what we know is happening, this anger and frustration and anxiety among women? How can we use that to actually advance breastfeeding, maternal health, and a feminist agenda? Let's have that conversation. Please join me. Please stay tuned for the registration info for that to open. I want to thank you for joining me and listening. We had a good crowd today. I appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation about how we redefine time in breastfeeding as what we acknowledge and celebrate, and also opening up our definitions to be more inclusive. This is how we will get the work done. Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it. Everybody have a great day.